Hi, in this video, I'm going to talk about a very important school of psychology, one of the major paradigms in the history of psychology that is known as behaviorism. Behaviorism, as a formal school of psychology, was founded by the very famous American psychologist John B. Watson or J.B. Watson in the United States of America. Watson really put it on the map in 1913 when he published his landmark paper, Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, which is sometimes called the Behaviorist Manifesto. Now, this school kind of emerged as a reaction against the then prevailing approaches, especially structuralism and functionalism. In one of the other videos, we've already discussed structuralism and functionalism. But just to remind you, structuralism, introduced by Wilhelm Wundt and later developed by Edward Titchener, was basically about finding the structure or components of consciousness. Functionalism, associated with William James and John Dewey, was more about what mental processes actually do, their function in helping us adapt. They both had their importance, but the main method they used was introspection. That is, looking inward and reporting what's going on in your own mind. And introspection, it's kind of tricky. It's private, it's subjective, and you can't really verify it in the same way you can verify a chemical reaction in a lab. Now, behaviorists, as we know, were not interested in that kind of stuff. They were trained in something else. Watson himself was basically an animal psychologist, working in labs studying animal behavior. And with animals, obviously, they can't just tell you, I'm sad or I'm happy. They don't have human language. So you only have one real choice. You observe their reactions. Like if an animal is in pain, say you apply a mild electric shock to a rat, you can see its actions, maybe a flinch, maybe some kind of facial reaction. That's objective, you can see it, but they can't tell you in words, I'm feeling pain. Now, humans, sure, we can say we're in pain, but Watson's point was this mental side, these inner feelings are still subjective. You cannot directly observe my pain. You can see my face, you can hear my voice, but the actual feeling itself, you can't access that. So here's the big philosophical point. In the 1910s and 1920s, psychology wanted badly to be considered a science, and at that time, the big gold standard for science was the physical sciences like physics, chemistry, biology. Think about it. In physics, if we're studying wave patterns, or in chemistry, if we're looking at sodium and chlorine combining to form sodium chloride, we don't say sodium is in love with chlorine. That's not how science works. Science sticks to objective, measurable phenomena. So Watson argued if psychology really wants to be a science, it has to do the same, only study what's observable and measurable. Which means instead of talking about mind and consciousness, we talk about behavior. And behavior can be measured in a lot of ways, not just movements and facial expressions, but also physical responses like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing speed, sweating, and now with modern tech, we can even measure brainwave patterns. But even with all this tech, we still can't see a thought or a feeling directly. That's why this school was called behaviorism. Now, later on, another giant in this field, B.F. Skinner, expanded behaviorism into what's called radical behaviorism. Skinner worked mainly from the 1930s to the 1960s and focused on how behavior is shaped by reinforcement and punishment, what we call operant conditioning. And according to Skinner, even our thoughts are basically behaviors, just ones that happen inside our heads. He described them as subvocal speech, like talking to ourselves quietly. And if we go back a little further, another big influence here was Ivan Pavlov, the Russian physiologist who around 1902 discovered classical conditioning. His famous dogs learned to salivate when they heard a bell because the bell had been repeatedly paired with food. That's a perfect example of learning explained through observable stimulus response connections. So, yeah, from the 1920s right up to the 1960s, behaviorism totally dominated psychology in the US. Almost every research article had a behaviorist angle. Watson, Skinner, Pavlov, these guys really shaped the field. Now, behaviorism brought a lot of rigor, but it wasn't perfect. When we're talking about humans, we have language, we can introspect, we can describe what's going on in our minds. Or if you only look at the observable half, you're ignoring a huge part of the picture. By the late 1950s and 1960s, psychologists started to push back. This is what's called the cognitive revolution, with people like Noam Chomsky, who famously critiqued Skinner's book Verbal Behavior in 1959. Chomsky argued that mental processes like thinking, memory, and language could and should be studied scientifically. That led to cognitive psychology, which now works alongside behaviorism. So, classical Watson and Skinner behaviorism doesn't dominate anymore, but it left a massive mark. Even today, behaviorist principles are used in therapy, education, animal training, and more. And the modern definition of psychology, the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, still reflects that balance. So, yes, that's behaviorism in a nutshell, where it came from, why it mattered, and why it's still worth knowing about. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe, and let me know if you want more videos that are maybe more detailed or shorter and more to the point. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care.